Hello and welcome back to Woodhill Park. After showing these wagons that Mark at Model Railway Fantasia produced and just sort of saying how good they were, people asked me how I actually did the weathering and painting and assembly, even though Mark had already given demonstrations. They were just personally interested in how I did it. So I thought about it and I thought I could do a little tutorial on how I painted and weathered, and if you're interested, that's what I've done in this little update. So all credit to Mark though, but you might want to know how I got into this stage. So if you do, keep watching. Oh, and if I sound a bit groggy, it's because I've got a cold at the moment. So I did make the effort and do this film, but I'm feeling rather rotten at the moment, so you have to excuse my voice. Well, you probably won't be able to hear me that well because I'm on my phone, but I'm out in the garage and I've got a heater on a low setting just to warm it a little bit in here. As I'm going to paint these, the bogies on here ready to be painted, I'll turn them upside down, so I'll do the underneath first and I'll spray them in a roof dirt like I did the others. It's important to wear a mask even though they're acrylic, or the paint is acrylic. You still don't want to breathe it in really, so I've got a mask out here. You could use just an ordinary dust mask because it is acrylic, but I might as well use this proper mask as I've got it. I won't be able to talk now because I'm going to put it on. I've sprayed the bogies one side and they're drying. It's time to spray the body with some red oxide, but High Coat call it just red primer, but this makes a good base coat in my opinion, ready to put a brown sort of rusty finish on it. Anyway, I'll get on to spray these. I've spaced them out so I can get between them to spray them, and it's mask on again and they're off. Now I've sprayed the underneaths and the sides, and you have to be very careful to come at the wagon from two different directions to make sure that you get good coverage, and just keep going backwards and forwards until you get the coverage you want. It's not crucial underneath because you ain't going to see it, but I still like a good covering of paint, and you just keep working at them. I've actually used almost 1 can now, and that's for the first batch of 6, and this is a batch of 8, so a can lasts for quite a long time. I've just got to flip these over when they're dry and paint from the top. The bogies are down here drying with a bit of light heat on it. You have to be careful because I did make a mistake of putting the heat up a bit too high in the past, and they start to bend. As they're only plastic, they start deforming, so you have to be very careful. Just a warm heat if you're doing something like this, and it will speed up the drying time. The red primer dries very quick actually, without any, as long as it's just sort of roomish temperature, it dries extremely quick, so you can keep putting coat after coat on, building it up. It's actually touch dry now, and it's not long since I've done it, so as long as these parts underneath, these struts, are dry, I can flip it over and paint the top, and they are pretty much dry. I'm just going to spray the tops of these bogies now, and because this takes a bit longer to dry, this paint, because it's an enamel. You could use acrylic for this as well. I just happen to have a colour what I quite liked as a bogie colour, even though it's going to get coated with some sort of rusty brown as well. I just thought it was a handy colour to have. But if you use enamels and acrylics, you have to make sure you get them out the right way, and you need to spray excuse me, enamel on first if you're going to do any painting, because if you spray enamel on acrylics, it bubbles up, so they don't get on unless you do it the right way round. So these are enamel, and the paint I'll be weathering it with will be acrylic, so that's fine, it's on top of the enamel. So I'll get on and spray the tops of these then. Now while the bogies are drying, I'll get on with more red primer on the bodies. Now I've turned them over, you'll see that there's like a hint of grey on the top of these struts here, and that's because obviously it was upside down, so you've got to make sure you coat these areas and just spray lightly inside. You don't have to go mad because you're going to put a load in it, or I am. And also I forgot to mention I did glue these together with super glue, so just to drop the super glue around the body, I don't know what you call it, the base of the body, and then just push it in place very carefully. So there is glue marks in here, but that will be covered by the paint. You won't even notice them. Well, I think I'll finish spraying them. I've given them a good few coats, and as you spray them, because it's a slight filler, you do lose quite a lot of the 3D printing, at least from a distance, so it does improve them. And on the floor, with a light bit of heat on them, the bogies are nearly dry as well, so yeah, I'll take them indoors soon and leave them to thoroughly dry before I start adding a weathering paint. Right, I'm back up in the loft again, and paint's nearly dry on most things, but I've been looking at the bogies again, and plastic wheels I have been using I'm running out of, which is a bit of a nuisance. People want silly money for them online even though they're plastic, but so it's dissuaded me from using them. But I will use what I've got. I think they're 10.25 or something, Triang Hornby plastic wheels, so I'll use these. But I've been looking at some HO wheels I've bought quite a while ago. I think they're 10.2 HO wheels, and they're from Eve Model, whatever they call themselves. They're Chinese anyway, and they produce these quite cheap. I can't remember what I pay for them now, but because they're HO, they're loose in the bogie. The actual axle itself is too short, so it was really annoying because they're about the right size. And I thought, what can I do to use these, as I don't want to buy any plastic ones at extortionate price. And I've been looking in my bits and pieces, and I come across these ferrules. I mean, you probably can't see it, I could zoom in. Little ferrules. And what I've been doing is cutting the head off the ferrule and using it as a bearing. So I'm pushing these bearings into the plastic recess in here. Probably can't see it, I'm in the way. Where you've got the hole for the pin of the axle, I've been lining that with the head of one of these, and I've done one so far, and it runs lovely. It's great. So I think I'll convert all the bogies I've got, well, what them match these wheels, and put these little bearings in, and they'll have metal wheels as well. That's the result. Just a little bit more cutting these ferrules and gluing them in. Once I've cut 4 of these up, they look like this, really tiny and small, but once they're pushed into the bogie, you can see the indentations for the axles. Once they're pushed into them and glued in, they act as nice bearings, and also allow for a slightly shorter axle. Right, this is just how I put these together. I decided that I wanted to screw the bogies on before I weathered it, and also glue in the buffers. But I left the buffers in their natural printed out grey, and I just weathered them from the grey as such. So they're slightly different colour when they come out compared with the background of the red oxide when you weather the rest of the wagon. Anyway, I used, I think it's, get me ruler to measure it, a 8mm long set screw, and they're not bolts, because a bolt has an unthreaded shaft to it at the top, so they are screws, but they're called set screws. And I went for slotted because I've got a great big drawer full from the time I've been in the trade. Probably was going to be thrown away at one time because they're steel, and I do remember a company going over to stainless steel and they used to just throw things in the skip in those days. Anyway, I rescued them, and I've got plenty of screws, and so they're 8mm long, and I chose a countersunk because when you screw it into the body, it also cuts its own threading, so providing you get the screw nice and upright, it will just cut its way in. And then you just do it up until the wheel won't turn, and then back it off about half a turn until the wheel rocks. So you just need to feel it. It rocks forward and back and side to side. So it's got plenty of play. And that way it will take up all the undulations in your track as it runs around, and it's got plenty of free movement. There are printed out pips that Mark said about that you can remove, and to be honest, if you just twist bogey, it will remove them anyway if they're too tight, so you get quite a bit of play. And it comes through just off being flush, so when you weather it you won't see the top of the screw. I mean, you could put a screw through and put a nut on, but I didn't think I needed to. You know, they just stay put anyway. And so I'll just do the other one at the other end the same way. To put the screw in first. So right up tight and then back off until you've got up and down movement and side to side. And that should be plenty of free movement when it's on the layout. Excuse me, I'm rather groggy because I've got some sort of lurgy cold. And hopefully it will wear off before Christmas, as I don't want my turkey to taste like a lump of wood. But hopefully I'll be over it soon. But yeah, that's how I put the bogies on, and I just glue the buffers in with some super glue in the original colour, like I've said, and when I weather them I just weather the buffers with the weathering brown I use, which is leather brown Vallejo. And I put the couplings in place, whatever couplings you're using. I mean, I just use ordinary tension locks, small sort of NIM tension locks at the moment. I can change it to whatever I want. The beauty of a NIM pocket that Mark's incorporated in his design. And yeah, I just spray them in the brown as well, just so everything's weathered the same sort of colour. But when weathering the body, if you weather it in sort of a careful manner, you can see the red grinning through, and that gives a red rusty effect that I quite liked, and I carried on to do on my last batch, so I hope to replicate it on this. There's a hair on there, pull that off. But, and then I'll pick out the various bits and pieces with acrylic paint pens, silver for hinges, or graffiti writing. Anyway, I'll get on and do the rest of it, and I'll maybe film it. It's now time to take this rather bright, garish wagon that's painted in a red primer and weather it down. I'm going to use leather brown Vallejo paint, and the numbers 70.871, but this does a good job as a sort of a dirty brown weathering. And I've got the buffers to paint for the first time, and to also blend in the couplings. The couplings I possibly will change in the future because they're not particularly realistic, but for now I'm quite happy with just these small tension locks. I mean, it does make them sort of have a big gap between the wagons, but I'll as I say, I'll work on that in the future. But now it's time to have a weather down with some acrylic brown, and get me battery airbrush out, make sure it's working alright, and then we're off I'll put a mask on in a minute, but I'll just give it a quick weathering, and I can talk to the camera at the same time, because it is acrylic. It's not terrible, but it's best to wear a mask all the same. So just a basic blow over to start with, make sure it's working. And you can see it changing from a gearish red into a sort of rusty wagon. A blend of dark and bright rust. I mean, for painting things like locomotives, I would never use acrylic paints and a battery airbrush, but for a wagon like this, it's fine. Oh, until the wagon rolls off. Right. As I said, when you spray inside, you can spray the top of the screw, and that blends in. And it would be good if it didn't roll downhill all the time. I think I'll have to do something about the level of this. Right, I think I've levelled it better, so hopefully it won't run away again. I'll just carry on, just weathering it down. And that'll do for now, I think. I'll move on to the next one. But that's basically what I did with the first rake that you saw. As somebody asked me, could I show how I did it? I thought I'll do it on camera for you. Once I'm completely finished, I'll give it a coat of satin varnish just to seal things in. Spraying these with a red oxide or primer is sort of has a marked difference from the actual final result, but what it does, it allows the bright red paint underneath to grin through and give this reddish sort of tint through the brown. So if you look at the original, or not the originals, but the first coat of paint compared with the final top coat, as I said, there's a marked difference, but you can still see them sort of glowing a bit, and I quite like that effect. Excuse me, that effect really just gives that red rusty look to the wagon, and a dull sort of rust as well, not an old rust. So a mixture of old and new rusts, just to make these scrap wagons look rather sort of run down and uncared for. And that's the result. hope you enjoyed the update and it give you some sort of clue on how to decorate these wagons or put these wagons together. And thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Bye.